I was at a coffee shop, my favorite coffee shop that I went to and wrote so many of the poems in this book, probably 90% of them. And I was sitting there and I was thinking about having a conversation with my younger self. And I think what really triggered that thought was I had been sitting at the coffee shop for a while. So I had two drinks sitting there and I had like just a black coffee and I had like a latte that was left over. And I was thinking about, okay, that's two different versions of me, right? Because like there was a phase in my life where it's like sugary drinks, like frappe, whatever, and then like black coffee. And I thought about what would it be like to meet my younger self and what would it be like to have her here at the coffee table with me, just chatting, and what would I say or what would we converse about? And I really wanted to write something that would talk about not only like me meeting her and being a comfort to her, but also because what I was trying not to do was write something where I'm like telling her, oh, things get better. Like life is great now. Every worry you have now doesn't need to be a worry. I wanted to validate her feelings because I feel like when I was writing it, I was picturing myself as like a 15-year-old.
Welcome to Anchor Change, where we help you panic responsibly in a chaotic world. I'm Katie Harbath. I've navigated impossible trade-offs in tech, politics, and my personal life for decades. I know that can be lonely. As a Midwesterner who spent 20 years in Silicon Valley and DC, it's taken me a while to figure it out. I still am. One thing that helps me is hearing the stories of other people forging their own paths. Because in a world of complexity, you don't have to navigate it alone. Welcome to Anchor Change. Welcome to Anchor Change. I'm Katie Harbath. I'm really excited for our final episode for season 4 to have Jennae Cecelia. I met Jennae through Instagram. I'm sure it was recommended to me at some point in time. I've really fallen in love with giving people custom poems as gifts. And she does this, and she wrote a beautiful one for my niece when she was born that I was able to frame for her. And she is a self-published author who has her first book coming out with a publishing house called Deep in My Feels that came out on Tuesday. So I highly recommend you go and pick it up. But she's probably most well known. You may remember earlier this year, she had a poem called How I Met My Younger Self for Coffee, or about meeting her younger self for coffee. And it went viral where people were making their own versions of this, but she wasn't getting credit for it necessarily from everyone as being the originator of that trend. So I wanted to talk to her not just about her poetry, but her journey of building up her own business around her writing, about the journey of self-published author to working with a publishing house, what it's like or what she's anticipating starting to go out on the road and go on a book tour, and her own journey of really figuring out her own path in this world. And so I hope you enjoy. Jennae, welcome to Anchor Change.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
I'm so excited to have you. And I just want to start at the beginning of your journey. And I want to know what first drew you to poetry as the creative form that you wanted to work on. Was there a moment in a time where it was like, this is what I need to write?
I don't actually have like an exact moment in my mind where I was like, I love poetry. I want to write poetry. But growing up, I was just always really interested in writing. I always liked telling stories. I was a storyteller as a kid. I would make up like a lot of fictional stories and write them down. And I've always just been a really big reader. So I think a lot of that attributed to me just enjoying words in general. It wasn't really until high school that I think I was writing poetry, but not realizing that it was poetry. A lot of the times it was like one of those things where I always looked at poetry as hard to understand because it can be, right? Especially some of the older poetry, you read it and you're like, huh? Like just the comprehension for it was not there for me. So I didn't realize what I was writing could be considered poetry probably until I was in early college and really got an interest in it. And it wasn't even in the sense of like, I never grew up reading poetry. I never grew up like having like, oh my gosh, I have this favorite poet I'm aspiring to be like. It was nothing like that. It's just, I've always had a love for words and sharing them in that way.
Are you a big journaler as well?
I am, yeah.
Because I imagine, because you're so vulnerable in your writing, and that's, as somebody who also tries to be vulnerable in her writing in a different way, that is really hard. Like hitting that send button when you're like, I'm just putting it all out there is an incredibly brave thing to do. Did that come naturally? Is it something that you're always sort of uncomfortable with? Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, at first it came really naturally, especially when it came to sharing online because there wasn't a lot of people reading it. So I was like, who cares? Like maybe someone will find this. And where I did it the most starting out was Tumblr. I don't know if you remember Tumblr
Oh yeah.
or if you used it, but I that's where I shared so much writing and so much of my thoughts that were just very like unfiltered. And then I kind of transferred over to doing Instagram and sharing it there. It's you'd think it would get easier over the years, but it's actually only gotten harder the more people that now have followed along with my journey because I have to be very careful of how things I'm saying might be perceived. And specifically, when it comes from like, if it's a sad poem or a negative poem or a poem that could specifically sound like it's directed at someone, I kind of preface now with my writing. A lot of it is inspired based by other people, by other conversations, by friends, like things I'm hearing. And it's not so much all about me specifically. I think the ones that really stay true to being about me are the ones that are like literally just about me versus the ones where it sounds like I'm talking about someone else. Typically, the poems that are like that are kind of more of when I got inspired by someone else's thought process or something I heard. And then the ones that are very individual and really sound like they're from me are truly like my thoughts. So it is hard because it's like sharing your diary with the world, but it's also rewarding because you realize how many other people think and feel this way, but they just don't know how to express it or say it in that way.
Do you run into challenges of then people thinking they understand you completely online when you're probably like you're being a little selective too in what you are sharing, even though you are being vulnerable?
Yeah, I would say that's really true. I think I'm trying to be better about this with my online audience, but I don't feel like I have represented myself in the best way of like who I am fully because I'm not this like very serious, deep only person. Like I'm really funny. I'm really sarcastic. Like people in my life know that I'm just like very goofy and which doesn't really like go with the poetry. Right. It's like, I'm like, yes, I can be very, very deep, but there's also this totally different side to me. So it's hard to show that when on my social media, when people are kind of like, oh, I'm following her for these deep thoughts and words and like things like that. I'm not following her for goofiness or whatever, but I have been trying to incorporate that a little bit more as I go because I think people haven't realized like, wow, she's just I don't know, like I don't want to say like a normal girl, but like I just am like I'm always messing up. I'm always have like flaws going on with like things that I'm doing, and nothing is ever smooth sailing, which I kind of like. I kind of am just known for just being a little bit like spontaneous and just go with the flow. So it is interesting to think that I think a lot of people do kind of have an idea of who they think I am in some way, but it's mostly because it's just poetry is what's representing me for the most part.
Yeah. So you started publishing on Tumblr. When was that? Was that like late 2010s?
It would have been more probably about like 2011 and 2012.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, Tumblr
Yeah.
was, kind of it was a different Tumblr at the time and
Yes.
online journey. When
Yes.
did you start self-publishing actual books?
My first one came out in April of 2016.
And what made you decide to self-publish? Did you try going the traditional route at all and it didn't work, or like what was that journey?
No, I didn't even try to go the traditional route. I had kind of read up on it a little bit and was like, I don't know if I want to wait to hear from publishers or agents or anything like that. And honestly, I think the best thing that happened to me is I was just 22 and naive and really just thought like, hey, I can do this on my own. You know, you just have it's almost like as a kid, like little kids, they have no fear, right? Like they're just like, they don't realize to even have fear of certain things. And I think when I self-published my first book, I didn't even realize that I should be having limitations or making myself feel like, oh, this won't sell. It was almost the opposite for me. I was like, surely like lots of people will buy this book if I self-published it. I just truly was like blissfully unaware. And I decided to go the self-publishing route, learned a lot about that and kind of what works, what doesn't work. And then, I mean, just so much came from there.
Can we dig into a little bit more about like what worked and what didn't work? And the reason I want to ask
Mhm.
is I feel like, here we are sitting, what, 15-ish years later, maybe, or I guess 10 years later from your first book.
Mhm.
And we're going to get to the one that you've just recently released. But I feel like more and more, if you have your own audience, it seems to me that in a couple of years, the self-publishing route could even become even more accessible to people and something to be able to get their content out there. And I talk to a lot of people who are trying to figure out, they have things they want to say, but they aren't sure. There's so many options, right? It's like so many different social media platforms. Do I go to the traditional route, the hybrid route, the self-publishing route? So I was hoping if you were willing to dig into it a little bit more, and you've got a fantastic ebook on your website that kind of documents this journey. I think it's still up there. So correct me if I'm
Yeah.
correct.
No, it is. It is.
A little bit of high level of sort of, what worked, what didn't work. And then I do want to ask about what made you decide to go a little bit more of a traditional route with this book.
Yeah. So with self-publishing in particular, what worked for me that I really like, and I say this to every author I talk to in the sense like I should say every soon to be author, right? The person who's like, I have a book, I want to write it, or I have it done and I just don't know what route to go. I am the biggest advocate still for self-publishing, especially with your first book, because what I learned along the way that I didn't know when I started was sure, people might view self-publishing as not as credible, although I think that's kind of going away. When I first started, it was kind of viewed like that. Like, oh, if you self-publish a book, it's not a real book. However, what's been really nice is if you self-publish something, it's almost kind of like your business card, right? You're putting something out there, you have a finished product. And so I was looking at it from the sense of not how can I make money from this, but how can I get the most reach from this? So you go from changing your mindset where it's like, I don't want to only publish this book because I'm trying to make money. I'm trying to create a name for myself. I want this to be something that's long lasting and not just short lived. And really, how can I do that? And a lot of with self-publishing, what's nice is you're kind of forced to learn so many things, right? You're forced to learn how to find the editor, how to find the cover artist, how to find just learn the marketing aspect. There's so many hats you have to wear. And you're almost making it the hardest it can be for yourself to then work backwards. And like every book after that I self-published, I felt more confident in it. It was an easier process. It took me way less time than with the first one. I mean, with the first book, it was like months and months of like little tedious things that I was like, oh my gosh, now I'm like, I could get that done in 25 minutes. And back then it took me months and hours of research and trying to figure it out. And so when it comes to self-publishing versus traditional publishing, there's so many differences, right? There's so many pros and cons of what that could look like. But ultimately, I think if you have your very first book, you should self-publish it. And then from there, allow that to build a name for yourself. And potentially that's how you get agents looking at you, publishers looking at you, things like that. And then kind of start to dip your toes into looking into the traditional publishing world.
And is that what happened with Deep in My Feels? How did that process roll out?
Yeah, that was really random, actually. It was just, I remember specifically, I had a conversation with my husband. I want to say it was like the end of 2023, where I was kind of like, I don't really know what's next for me, because at that point I had self-published 12 books. I had been at it for about 9 years at that point. I was like, what is the next thing for me? I've had a few of my books really take off and be extremely successful. And so I was kind of just like hemming and hawing. I was like, I think maybe I'm going to focus more on helping authors. I'm going to focus more on doing my custom poems that I'm doing. And then I randomly one day just had a DM in my inbox from an agent. And I truly thought it was just not real, because I get stuff like that kind of often, but I was like, oh, let me just entertain this. And I had seen that like who was following them was like people that are in my industry. So I was like, okay, this must be credible. And they basically said, hey, we've been seeing how your books have been doing over the years. If you ever want to go the traditional publishing route, we would love to represent you. So it's very different than like most authors would experience. Typically, you're reaching out trying to find an agent. But that goes back to what I said about if you have work out there for people to find, this is a potential of something that could happen. So I signed with them in February of 2020. And then they went through the process of pitching my book, which was Deep in My Feels, which was such a crazy process because it was literally only 5 poems and a title that we were pitching. That's it. And and because again, with that credibility aspect, like I said, they saw numbers that I've had on Amazon. I provided them the numbers through self-publishing, and saw it as less of a risk, right? I'm a little bit less of a risk of an author to take on because I have proof that what I have done has amounted to something. And yes, it's signed with Andrews McMeel for Deep in My Feels.
That's fantastic. And when did you also start doing, you mentioned the custom poems. When did you start doing that and start kind of building a business? I mean, around, because it's very much this sort of, we've talked a lot in my podcast this season about the portfolio life and talking
Mhm.
about having many different streams of income. And so when did you pick up doing that?
I had been doing free custom poetry on my Instagram for years. I mean, I was trying to think back to when I started it, and I wanted to say it was 2018. I would just randomly put up a story and be like, hey, if you would like a little custom poem, I'll write one for you and send it over. And then as the years went on, I would do that here and there. And I would get so many requests. Like I'm talking probably about 2 years ago, it got into the thousands of people asking
Wow.
for one. And I was like, you know what? I think if there's people who want a guaranteed one, they'd be willing to pay for it. And so it was, I think it was about November of 2023. So almost 2 years ago. I put it up there. The first round was kind of like trying to feel it out, trying to understand like what this would look like. So they were pretty cheap. And again, because you're building up, right? I'm trying to figure it out as I go. So they were pretty cheap and they were all handwritten. And then I quickly learned like I couldn't do them, or I should say handwritten on my iPad. And so they were all digitally delivered. But I realized very quickly writing them all was very time consuming. Like my hand was cramping, like it was a lot. And so I kind of had to adjust to the demand and start doing, okay, I'm going to offer typed poems and they'll be for cheaper because they're typed, right? So they're on the computer, you get a typed one. If you want a handwritten one, it's going to be a little bit more. And then if you want a handwritten one with an illustration, it would be a little bit more than that. But I started that in November, like I said, end of 2023. And I've already done over 800 custom poems.
Wow.
It's been what? It's really just like become my full-time thing outside of all the other random things I'm doing. But yeah, it really took over. It's been so fun.
It's one of my favorite gifts to give people. I first encountered it. Somebody had it at their wedding reception. They had a custom poet, so people could go up and she would ask a few questions, and she had a typewriter there, and so she would type the poem and do it at the event. And then I came across you on Instagram, which I can't remember exactly how, but the one you did for my niece when she was born was just such a great gift and so unique, right? Like, so when you're like, this person is everything. What can I possibly get them? Like a custom poem is just, I just highly recommend it
Oh,
for
thank
people.
you. Yeah, that honestly, when you said the lady at the wedding, I'm like, how do I do that? Because that would be so fun.
You should think about it. Like I did it too. I did a women's dinner here in DC and I asked her to write a custom poem for the dinner and I explained to her why I was trying to do it. And it was about, so I had this newsletter I did called Reclaiming the Fairy Tale. And it was about how I wanted us to be celebrating women for having babies and getting married is fantastic. And I love that. But we should also be celebrating buying our own homes, starting our own
Mhm.
businesses, like many other types of celebrations. And so she wrote this custom poem and I gave it to everybody as the party gift
That is so cool.
as well as for that. So I definitely
I
recommend
love
thinking
that.
about that because it's a great way to kind of turn them out and a unique thing to do.
It is. And it's nice too because custom art or custom poetry in general is not a new thing, right? It's not a new concept. I've had some people reach out to me that are poets. They're like, is it okay if I do this too? I'm like, you don't have to ask for my permission. Like, I'm not doing an original idea by any means. But what's nice is it's like you think, oh, well, there's competition, right? If other people are doing it. But everybody writes their poems differently. So someone might want a poem in my style versus someone else's style. Like it's again, it's like art, right? You might like a piece of art and someone else might say, that's not something I'd want hung in my house. So it's all just based off of your own personal preference.
Now, did you get into illustrating at the same time that you kind of got into poetry or did that come later?
I have always had an interest. Actually, art, like drawing, has always come before writing for me. My grandma was an amazing oil painter. She did like the best landscapes, people. She's a million times better than I ever am. But I had an interest in that. In high school, I took all art classes. My senior year, it was all art. I ate lunch in the art room. I lived and breathed in the art room. So for me, it's art almost comes drawing and painting and all of that has always almost come before writing. So once I started going into being an author and writing and all of that, I was like, how can I incorporate the two things that I love? And I'm by no means, I am not a fabulous artist in the sense of like very in depth detail. I mean, there are some crazy really good people out there. But what I like is I kind of like doing the cute, simple illustrations with my work. I'm doing I just kind of have like my own style to it where it's very simple, but it goes well with the words I'm writing.
Did you transitions maybe the wrong word, add in the digital component to your drawing? Was that a natural transition? Do you enjoy digital or analog when you're doing your art? Do you do a mix of both? I'm always curious about that.
It's funny. I was just recently thinking about that. I do so much digital art now, so it's mostly on my iPad with in the Procreate app. I'm rarely doing like pencil to paper type of like painting, just any of that. And I need to get back into because I have gone too far into the digital side. And I would love to get back to doing like actual like stuff off of a screen.
Yeah, I did a little bit of watercolor when this June when I was at my parents' cabin because I was just like, I need to find more. We're on our screen so much, and like
I
I
know.
think COVID just like turbocharged that even a little bit more. And so
I
it's like
agree.
whatever you can do to just have that. I saw something again, it was probably on Instagram or something where people were like, we need to bring back art class where you have the eccentric aunt teacher who's the art teacher that you just for lunch you get to draw or make something for an hour and she tells you it's lovely and you take it home and put it on your fridge and
Yeah.
just have
That's
that
the person I'm
experience.
trying to be. I want to be that art teacher. I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
I love that. So I want to talk about the poem that went viral, Meeting My Younger Self for Coffee, because it took off in a massive way earlier this year, I think it was. First, can you tell us about, I don't know if you have it easily accessible that you could read it to us.
Oh, yeah.
I totally forgot to like ask you to do that, but we can take a break here while if you have it handy.
I have like my books as the prop up for the
Oh, I love it.
computer. So I was like, where did it go? No, I do. I do have it handy.
Would you read it first and then tell us,
Yeah.
or maybe first give us a little bit of what the inspiration was for the poem and then read it to us?
Yes. So the inspiration for the poem, basically how it went down was I had turned in my manuscript for this book in August of last year. And as I was reading through the last section of it, I just kept feeling like something was missing. It felt very complete, but I was like, there needs to be a poem that I could point to a poem in the book and say, this sums up what the book is as a whole. I didn't have a poem like that. And so I was at a coffee shop, my favorite coffee shop that I went to and wrote so many of the poems in this book, probably 90% of them. And I was sitting there and I was thinking about having a conversation with my younger self. And I think what really triggered that thought was I had been sitting at the coffee shop for a while. So I had two drinks sitting there and I had like just a black coffee and I had like a latte that was left over. And I was thinking about, okay, that's two different versions of me, right? Because like there was a phase in my life where it's like sugary drinks, like frappe, whatever, and then like black coffee. And I thought about what would it be like to meet my younger self and what would it be like to have her here at the coffee table with me just chatting and what would I say or what would we converse about. And I really wanted to write something that would talk about not only like me meeting her and being a comfort to her, but also because I what I was trying not to do was write something where I'm like telling her, oh, things get better. Like life is great now. Every worry you have now doesn't need to be a worry. I wanted to validate her feelings because I feel like when I was writing it, I was picturing myself as like a 15-year-old. I feel like no one was validating my feelings. Everybody was just telling me like, oh, things will get better or who cares? It's really not a big deal. But when you're that age, even the smallest things do feel like a big deal. So the conversation I wanted to have with her was kind of went that way. And I wanted to just talk about how different we are in the way that we kind of show up and what we look like, but also too that I'm a person for her to come to that she didn't have. So that was kind of the idea for the poem.
Fantastic. Please read it for us.
Yes. So it goes, I met my younger self for coffee at 10:15. She was late, I was early. I wore my dark brown hair in a slicked back bun. Her hair was faded red and in her face. I had dark blue jeans on. She wore sweatpants with a few stains. She lets out a sigh and has a good cry. I tell her to release her feelings one at a time. The scars on her have now faded on me quite a bit. I want to tell her it won't always be like this, but I don't. She doesn't need to hear that things will be better. She just wants a hug and reassurance of her feelings during this uncertain season ahead of her. We leave the aroma of coffee beans and baked goods. I walk her home to our old neighborhood. We won't meet again for 15 more years, but each day she thinks of the woman who acknowledged her tears.
It's so beautiful. How
Thank
many
you.
edits do you go through when you write your poems? Like some of them, is it just one and done or? Did you
It
have to kind of
really
go through a few edits to get it right?
It really depends. That poem was pretty much a one and done. I wrote it out. I kind of had the flow for it. There was a couple, really just maybe a couple words I had to change, but I don't know what it is. I always tell my friends that it feels like a download. I can't even explain it. It's like if I hear any word or have a thought and it triggers a poem in me, it's like it's writing itself in my brain faster than I can keep up. And I'm like scrambling to get all of the words out. And that was one of those where I sat there and I wrote it probably in no longer than 15 minutes, kind of just tweaked a few things and then recklessly posted it on Instagram right away. I was like,
So you didn't, there was no waiting in between. You kind of wrote it and put it out there.
I was so excited about the poem after I wrote it. I can't even tell. When you write or create something that you feel like is like, oh my gosh, this is like one of the best things I've written in a long time, you get like this natural high and you almost lose judgment. Like I was like, I need to just share this with people. And I just recklessly posted it on Instagram right away. I wrote it, typed it out, put it on like in Canva, typed it out there, posted it immediately. And that was in, I think, October, I want to say. So before the trend happened, right away, people were like, I'm obsessed with this, blah, blah, blah. Like it was crazy. So it was like validating to me, like I need to have this in the book. I emailed my editor. I'm like, we have to put this in the book. I wrote like the best poem I've ever written. That's how I feel whenever I write something that's like really good. I'm just like, this is the best thing I've ever written. We have to put it in there. And we did. And I'm so glad we did.
I was going to ask you about that feeling. I had it a bit yesterday because I finished the third draft of editing my book and I read the end and like I actually got a little teary eyed. And it's because you feel like sometimes these things are like you have all these thoughts jumbled in your head, and then when you finally see it all kind of come together, like you said, it sounds like you were just like that excitement, and then you just want to get it out there.
Yes. And that feeling almost becomes addicting as an artist. Like I think that's why when artists have like a lull in their career, depression or anxiety definitely comes along with it because when you're basically, even if I'm having writer's block, my writer's block and like me not feeling great about life, it coincides because if my art isn't flowing well, I'm not feeling great. And if my art's flowing well, I'm feeling amazing. So it's just like, it's hard because you can't turn that off, right? Like as a creative, as an artist, you're always thinking about your work in some way. And it does determine a lot of how you feel day in and day out.
So when did it start going viral? And how did you find out?
Yeah, so I posted it on TikTok in the end of January. I did like a little 6-second video with the text over it to Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls. And I remember like it took off. It got a ton of traction, right? I think it maybe got 500,000 views or something like that. And maybe about a week or two later, I got a few messages actually from readers of mine on Instagram saying, hey, I've been seeing your poem on TikTok by people, but it's your poem, but not quite your poem. And I think they're stealing it and taking it as theirs. And this is something that has happened to me so many times. So getting a message like that is not new. And some of them were sending me the videos and I was looking. So for the first few people that I saw doing it, I had at least reached out and said, hey, I don't know if you are aware, but this is a poem that I wrote. Could you please make sure you're giving me credit? And they were all super nice about it. But by the time I had found out about it, so many people started to think it was a trend, like, which I get. They didn't realize, oh, it came from a poem. They just saw someone saying, I met my younger self for coffee, and they kind of filled in the blanks. When it first started, people weren't really changing the words much at all. It was maybe like a couple of things. And obviously, as time went on, people really started to restructure what it was as a whole. But yeah, it was probably February. It started taking off on TikTok like crazy, like something I've just never seen in my life before. I couldn't scroll without seeing one. I was like, what is happening? So many people were reaching out. All of a sudden, it was like Sophia Bush was doing one, which I don't know if you know who she is, but I'm a big One Tree Hill fan. So I was like, what is happening? And TikTok, it was like going crazy. And then, like, naturally, as social media does, Instagram's always a little behind the trends. So then all of a sudden, as it's blowing up on TikTok, maybe a week later, it's picking up now on Instagram. And now on Instagram, everybody is doing it. And it just, I just still have never experienced something like
Why do you think it resonated with people so deeply in that moment?
I obviously don't have the for sure answer, but what I can think of is what that poem offers is like, if you think about the concept of like meeting your younger self or like like I think so many people say in life, like, what would you tell your younger self, right? Like, what's a piece of advice for your younger self? So that concept that I wrote isn't anything new or groundbreaking, right? But I think because the poem was structured in a way where it's like, I can see myself in between these words. And although the words aren't exactly fitting to me, I have a present day self and I have a past self. So how could I think about this poem if it was me and this experience, and how could I use that as like a healing version for myself? So it's almost kind of used as like a prompt for people, I feel like. And I think it just, I don't know, truly people are like, oh, was it a poem that's so different than other stuff that you write? And not really. Like if you read a lot of my other stuff, it's not like it's anything crazy different. So I don't know.
I
I
mean, I
really
think,
don't know.
yeah, no, I mean, like you said, it was a bit of a journal prompt, right? I think
Yeah.
for people, and you put that different twist on it, which was not go back and tell your younger self. It wasn't necessarily that it's going to be okay. It wasn't specific pieces of advice. I like that
Hmm.
it was, I'm just going to hold the space for you. Like
Hmm.
I understand it's okay to feel that way. And I think far too often we have this feeling of like we need to constantly be fixing ourselves and
Hmm.
constantly be like trying to improve. At least I'll say like that's what I really enjoyed about writing it my own version, which I did well after the trend. But
That's
once we
okay.
agreed to do the for those in the DC area, we will be at Old Town Books on August 17th. If you want to join us for a chat and to meet Jennae. But what was that? So you're seeing all these people sharing your versions of your poem, not necessarily giving you credit. So that had to have been mixed feelings about like what was sort of that emotional journey for you of sort of seeing that and wondering like where do you stand up and be like, hey, I just, I, just so you all know, it kind of came from me, but also not, wanting to give people that space of being like, I love that you're taking this and making it your own.
It was definitely a hard balance, especially at first. I've had poems take off and do really well, and people share them, and maybe they say that they're their own, but it always stayed the same poem. I've never had it where people were restructuring it or filling in their own version of it. I think the whole process of it, of people finding it, doing it their way, having it being a healing process for them, like that always will outweigh the fact that the credit for me didn't necessarily follow all the way through. But I also keep saying to people that I truly believe most people would have credited me if they even knew it came from me. Most people just had no idea. It wasn't like, oh, I'm intentionally not saying that this girl wrote it. So I just have a lot of like grace for people in this situation because it's one of those things where I am just grateful no matter the outcome. If my words are impacting people in a positive way, that's all I could ask for. That's all I want. And so whether it's received in the way that, people know that it's my poem or that it came from my book or not, if it impacted them and for a moment in time they were able to sit with themselves and think about, what would that look like if that was their version of it, that far outweighs not having the credit follow me.
As you were talking, I was just sitting here thinking how cool it would be to take your poems and make like a journal of sorts for people where they can use your poems as journal prompts and like
Mm,
be able
that would
to
be
do
cool.
that. Because there was a couple of the poems when I was rereading the book last night, and I even messaged you about the first one. I was like, "Oh yeah, you're hitting me deep in the feels." The first few lines. Thank you.
Oh,
You were not
good.
lying. about all this. What's some of the biggest misunderstandings people have had about you going viral? Like you've been posting about some of them, in the lead up to the book launch, but I'm sure there's a lot of messages you're getting from people where maybe it's not that didn't actually come true of the poem going viral.
Yeah, I mean, the most topped question, or not, it's not even a question, it's more a statement that people have been saying is they're like, oh, I'm sure that you've sold thousands and thousands and thousands of books because that poem took off. How could you not? Right? Millions of people, you got, interviewed by certain people, but that's just not the case. Like, I say this all the time, and I talk about it with I've talked about it with my literary agent, I've talked about it with so many other authors. You could have millions and millions of followers and have a book deal and maybe only sell 100 books, right? And people would be like, what? Like how? You have millions of followers. How do you only have that? And so with a viral poem, again, you'd think the same thing. Well, you've had millions of people seeing it, la 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 la. How does that not equate to sales? But it's just virality I think like I need to like deep dive into this more with people because obviously I've experienced it firsthand and I know there's other people who could speak on it as well. But that does not equate to people that doesn't always transfer over to sales, right? And so I feel like the people who still were the ones that were most invested, most wanting to pre-order my book were not necessarily the people finding me from that trend, but the people that have always been around and have been my biggest supporter through all of it because I've created a relationship with these people. I send pen pal letters to people. I communicate through DMs pretty consistently. I talk to people through email. And those are the people that are going to be the first to want to buy or are interested in something that I have to offer versus people who have no idea who I am. I have no relationship built up with them. People buy when they trust you. And so when that poem went viral, sure, I'm not ruling out that there was people who bought it from the trend. I'm sure there definitely was, but I still think the majority of the people who have purchased it are people that have always been there for me or have found me at some point, but they found me in a different way. There's actually an author who just talked about this. I'm going to butcher her name, but I know her first name is Amy. I think it's McNee. She came out with a book about We Need Your Art. And she's super transparent on Substack. So she talked about how she was on a podcast with Jay Shetty. Is that how you say his name? Am I saying that right?
I think so. I'm not entirely sure.
I'm so bad with, we were just talking about that earlier. I'm so bad with butchering names, but she was on a podcast with him and she said, you know, her team, there's a whole Substack post about this on her page, but her team was prepping to, you know, expect that going on the podcast would, her sales are in a skyrocket, right? Like this person has millions and millions of reach. Going on that type of podcast is huge. And she said it didn't even change her sales one bit.
Wow.
And someone sent me this actually after I made a post about talking about my poem going viral and like the sales that have come from it and how you'd think it would be a lot more. And someone sent me a link to her article and she's like, she was just talking about this, how she went on this podcast and you would think all of these sales would come from it and they didn't. And it's, you don't know the answer to it, right? Because you'd be like, oh, surely it will. But again, I think it's that relationship aspect. Like people buy when they know you.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, everybody I've talked to that's been an author has been telling me about same thing that you said at the beginning about writing, you know, if you're writing a book, do not do it to sell books. Like it's a business card. It leads to other things. It can lead into, like for me, I want it to lead into my newsletter, my podcast and speaking engagements and
yes,
and stuff like that. And to your point about building up that, and I purposely, I had the idea for the book in 2021, but I actually waited like 4 years now, but it'll be 5 by the time the book comes out before I even published it for many reasons. But one of them was I was like, I need to build up more of an audience to like be able to have, you know, people who are wanting to buy this because people are telling me how hard it is to get folks to buy books. You know, it's hard to get them to do paid subscriptions. It's hard to get them to pay for anything these days.
There's a statistic somewhere and I'm going to totally botch it, but I've read it multiple times. It's actually so much harder to sell a book to people than like a $300 course.
Wow.
It's people, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is because in my head, I'm like, it's a $16 book. Like you'd think it's like, this is the easiest way to support someone, but let's put up perspective, right? If I was to put up an Instagram story and I linked my book to buy, right? And let's just rule out pre-order because maybe you could say, oh, they're hesitating because it's a pre-order and they're just going to buy it damn. So let's just say it's already out. If I put up an Instagram story and said, hey, my book is out. If you're interested in buying it, here's the link, $16, right? So then the next slide. Maybe the next slide is me saying, hey, if you want to order a custom poem, okay, right? This is just one poem. It's custom to you. $50. The book link will probably get clicked, you know, 20 to 30 times something. Who knows what that even transferred then to sales. So let's just say maybe of that 20 or 30, 5 people bought it. The custom poem link will get clicked so much more and probably equates to like 45 sales. And it's so funny because it's like one of them is drastically cheaper. One of them's a whole book. One of them's like a thing you could hold, but somehow it's easier to sell the more expensive custom poem than the book. I will never understand it. There's so many authors who will say the same thing.
But do you think the book is still necessary? But it seems like you still think the book is still necessary as part of that equation.
100% it's still necessary. It's just interesting how much harder you have to go to market and sell a book versus other things. It just blows my mind still to this day. That's like, wow, people are quick to buy something a little bit more expensive, but not so much something less expensive. But what's nice, for instance, what you were saying about if you want to do speaking events, if you want to do event, like anything like that, having your book is so nice because you can have that as your physical product to sell at the speaking event. Or maybe the event is going to buy, let's say there's 100 people there, they're going to buy 100 copies of your book. And like, that's how you can make money that way. So no, having a book is always super important. I think there's just different ways you could sell it than just so literal of like, hey, please buy this book.
We've only got about 5 minutes left, and I do want to ask you a bit more about the career that you've built for yourself, because one of the themes that I've been trying to do this season is so many people in various industries that I work in, whether it's tech. I'm here in DC, there's a lot of federal government workers who've been laid off or displaced. There's just a lot of change happening in the world right now, right? Like AI is coming in, all of this kind of stuff. And so a lot of people are trying to figure out how do they pivot or rethink their careers and what this might look like. And you have put together something very, very much that works for you, but I imagine it's required a lot of pivots and will require a lot more pivots. Can you share a bit about how you sort of think about those? You were talking about in 2023, you were talking with your husband about like sort of what's next for you. What's that process as you're trying to kind of figure out like where you're going to take your work?
Yeah. I wish I could be an author where it's like I'm just writing my books and then sitting back and they're just out there making money, but that's just not the case. And I have had to get really creative with ways to expand who I am and make it into a full business and not just be about my books. And I think that's where a lot of authors where they say, "Oh, I can't be a full-time author," which I agree. Like it would be very, very hard to be just a full-time author just off of books alone because it fluctuates so much. You never know what you're going to make. Your royalties could be something one month and nothing the next. I mean, December, it's crazy. You get so many sales and then January totally goes down. And so it's very unpredictable. But what I decided early on was like, I need to find other aspects of what I'm doing to then be able to support myself fully as an author. And so for me, that has looked like doing the custom poems, doing book cover design, helping other authors in the process of figuring out what they want to do and would like to do. Also, too, I've just started recently getting into the idea of shipping some of my own books, like buying in some of my books and shipping them myself because you don't have to deal with like Amazon and like them taking all the royalties and all of that stuff. So there's just like so many different levels to it that I've had to adjust to over the years and just try to figure out, okay, what's a way that I can sustain myself in this career that is still something that I really love, but I'm not only having just my books.
Is there something that you've unlearned about success or creativity that you wish more people might know or think about?
I think what I wish I knew early on is that if you would love to have a creative career and that's something you want to go towards, and if you want to be successful at it, you have to play the long game. And I didn't realize that in the beginning. I was like, oh, a year or two in, surely like I'll have it all figured out. And I'm now 9, almost 10 years in, and I feel like I'm just getting my footing. Like I feel like I'm just in the place where it's like, okay, I'm understanding this. I have all these things going on, and it's taken that long. It's taken up until this point to get there. But I talk to so many authors who they're year 2, year 3 in, and they're like, I think I'm going to give up. Like, this isn't working. I'm like, don't do that. Like, you have to commit. You have to you have to go for it. You have to be in it for the long haul. And I did not know that starting out. And I wish I did. Or maybe it's better I didn't know. I'm not sure. But, yeah, cause now just now, truly this year, I feel like I'm like, I have my footing. I understand what I'm doing. My path is a lot more clear than any time in the past.
All right, last question. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on social media everywhere as at Jennae Cecelia and then JennaeCecelia.com.
And buy Deep in Your Feels, available at all of your local bookstores, Amazon, anywhere you like to purchase books. Please make sure you grab it. And I'm so looking forward to our conversation in Alexandria. So if anybody is in the DC area, again, come check us out August 17th. It is a ticketed event, so make sure you go to Old Town Books website to grab a ticket, but we would love to see you. And Jennae, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That was a perfect episode to end the season on. My goal with season 4 of Anchor Change was to highlight individuals from all different walks of life who have been pivoting in their careers, who have created unique careers, who are thinking about the uses of technology, how so many different things are changing. And I know so many of you are going through so much change right now with your own careers and your own lives. And my goal was just to help provide you some ideas and stories and inspiration from others who have had to do that too. And Jennae has really built something up for herself. And I really admire what she's been able to do and build and how she continues to think about her own creative and entrepreneurial journey. And so this brings to a conclusion to season 4. I plan on a season 5 already. Hopefully will come here maybe late September, probably October. But I need some time to think about what the themes are going to be and the guests and everything. But I can't thank all of you enough for listening, for your comments, for being a supporter. And please make sure you stay in touch with me. I'll continue right at anchorchange.substack.com. But until then, I'll see you next time.